It's been over a year now since I got my Tesla Model S, and the time has finally come for me to do a follow-up review. This video has taken a lot longer than I expected to be released, and that's due in no small part to how much has happened over the past year that needs to be covered. So buckle up and let's get to it. Starting off with the elephant in the room, which some of you may have already noticed, this is a different Model S than was featured in my video last year. And that is because, unfortunately, I was in my first car crash a few months after that video came out. This was nothing short of a miserable experience, but at least nobody was seriously injured, and through it I did learn some things about my Tesla that I otherwise wouldn't have. For starters, they are in some ways the best and in other ways the worst car to be in an accident. With their 5-star safety rating and airbags galore, you'll likely come away from the initial accident relatively unharmed. But in my opinion, that's where the good news kind of ends. You see, as soon as the airbags are deployed in a Tesla, of any model, not just the S, the Tesla will automatically detonate its pyro fuse. When this fuse is detonated by the car, it physically severs all power coming from the high voltage battery. On the surface, that might seem like a good thing, but that safety measure means that wherever your car comes to a stop at is where it will stay until the tow truck arrives. My Model S was plenty intact enough to gimp itself to the side of the road had that fuse not blown, but because it did, my car was left sitting in the middle lane of a busy highway for over a half an hour with me inside of it. My only options were to sit there and wait with highway traffic swerving around the vehicle at freeway speeds, or attempt to jaywalk across 2 lanes of that same swerving traffic. Were I in that same accident in a modern gasoline car, I could have easily gimped it to the side of the road, which would have been significantly safer for everyone involved. After about 2 months of phone calls and paperwork, I finally began searching for a replacement car and discovered the same thing that many commenters had pointed out on my last video. The car market had significantly changed, and these cars cost quite a bit more than I paid for mine. After a few weeks of searching, I was able to purchase this 2015 Model S 85D for what I consider to be a reasonable price. It's similarly equipped to the last one, but being that it's a few years newer, there are some differences. First off, the metallic black with the stealth-wrapped nose cone is a very good-looking combo in my opinion. I do still prefer colored cars, but this metallic black has really grown on me. Secondly, I prefer the 19-inch wheels that this car has over the 21-inch wheels which I had previously. The ride is better, the handling doesn't seem any different, and I'm not constantly afraid of curbing the rims. And personally, I just prefer the look of having a smaller wheel. A difference I'm less cracked on is the panoramic sunroof. Mine works fine and doesn't leak, for now, but the large glass surfaces give the interior of the car a subtle echo. You get used to it and you stop noticing it after a few weeks, but I just found it really weird initially. And it doesn't help that I almost never open it because of how unreliable they are. The opening and the closing action also wears out the seals over time, and a lot of the parts for this particular model of sunroof aren't being made anymore. So it really is best to just leave it shut. Also, it's tinted so darkly from the factory that I really don't see much appeal. I mean, when you're sitting in the car trying to look out of it, it almost appears opaque. This car also came with next-gen front seats, and I'm gonna go against pretty much everyone else on this opinion. They're actually less comfortable to me than the first-gen seats. It's not the seat itself, but the shape. The bolsters are so contoured that even for a shrimp like me, they kind of push my shoulders forward into a slumping position that gets really uncomfortable after a while. That said, they are very much a sport-focused seat, and you can throw this car around all you want and you will not slide out of them. Another one of the more major differences is that this car has not had its computer upgraded. It's still using the original MCU1 control unit, and I actually do not care. Other than the animation speed and the lack of features like Netflix and YouTube, it really works every bit as well as my MCU2 did in the previous car. I don't have the random crashing that a lot of people have experienced, and it's worked so well that I honestly have no plans to upgrade the car. I really don't like the interface of the V11 software update Tesla released, but the MCU has nothing to do with that. Something else the MCU has nothing to do with is autopilot. This car is equipped with Tesla's AP1 autopilot system, which uses a single forward-facing camera, radar, and several ultrasonic sensors to autonomously drive the car on highways. Unlike Tesla's newer vision-only AP2 or FSD beta systems, Autopilot 1 is pretty much a finished product. After 16,000 miles of driving with it, I found it to be almost flawlessly accurate on the highways, and more importantly, its behavior is incredibly repeatable. After using it just a few times, I can easily identify, just by looking at the road in front of me, whether there's something that's going to trip it up or whether it'll handle it perfectly, with pretty much absolute certainty. AP1 has proven itself to be a reliable tool that has made long highway driving so much more pleasant. Its feature set is much more limited than newer autopilot systems, but those additional features have come at the cost of dependability in my experience. A couple of months ago, I actually had a chance to get some seat time in a 2022 Model Y with the then latest version of the FSD beta software installed. And it was terrifying. You could be driving along a straight road and the car just decided it needed to randomly slam on the brakes with nothing in front of you. Or if you came to a bend in the road, it would sometimes handle it perfectly, and sometimes on that exact same stretch of road decide to ignore that bend and keep going straight. If I had a car with that system, I literally would never use it because the stress that it would put me through wouldn't be worth it. And you might be thinking, well, of course, it's a beta. But here's the problem. Non-beta AP2 cars aren't being shipped with radar or ultrasonic sensors anymore. So a lot of these problems have trickled down into newer non-beta cars. So depending on what year your AP2 car was made, your experience can vary wildly. In a lot of ways, it honestly seems like Autopilot is getting progressively worse, not better, which leaves my old AP1 car in a very favorable spot. The radar can see through fog or heavy rain much better than even I can, and in stop-and-go traffic jams, it has been a game changer. For those of you wondering, I enjoy my Tesla as much today as when I bought the first one years ago. Even on longer road trips, charging is rarely inconvenient, and when I'm just making short local trips, it's actually more convenient to be able to charge at home rather than having to plan for a gas stop. And speaking of charging, I actually track the electricity it takes to charge my car through a software called TeslaMate that I set up on my home server. The car uses between $35 and $85 worth of electricity per month, depending on whether it's winter or summer. For people in colder climates like me, the regenerative braking pretty much doesn't work at all when the battery is very cold. And in the winter, it seems to take about 40 minutes of driving for the battery to fully warm up. So depending on the length of your trip, you may never get it fully up to temperature. This, paired with the added power draw from running the heater and heated seats, makes for a wintertime range of about 2/3 what it is in the summer. Or, for this car, about 180 to 200 miles. But keep in mind that if you were to take a winter road trip, the cold weather won't have as much of an impact on your car's range. Driving it will keep it warmed up, and supercharging will further heat it up, which lessens and in some cases pretty much negates all of the winter range loss. I will admit that the driving experience can at times be somewhat sterile. The performance largely does make up for that though. This 85D makes the exact same power as my P85 did, while also having a slightly longer range. So it's actually been a nice upgrade in that respect. There's an old saying though. It's more fun to drive a slow car fast than it is to drive a fast car slow, and that holds true here. My Pontiac Firebird makes half the horsepower, but it is a lot more fun to drive. But for just getting from point A to point B, it's hard to beat the quiet, smooth electric power. While it's not accessible to everyone, honestly, owning both of these cars does kind of make for a best of both worlds scenario. Moving on, a comment that was often made on my last video was about the car's repairability. So let's talk about that. During my time with the car, 3 components failed and needed to be replaced. First, the low voltage battery. Second, the washer pump. And third, the main high voltage battery pack. Let's go through these one by one. First off, the 12-volt battery. This is basically a lead-acid motorcycle battery that powers the lights, the MCU, and the windshield wipers, and other small little things. The Tesla started displaying an error message about it, and after some research, I had the option of ordering the part and installing it myself, or having mobile service do it. And the price was close enough that I chose the latter. The mobile tech came to the office where I work during the day and did it in the parking lot over the span of about 30 minutes. The price for this was actually less than what I've seen quoted at some other OEM dealers for a car battery replacement, and this was the vehicle's original lead-acid battery, so I really don't have any complaints here. Second was the windshield washer pump. This is a stupid thing to fail, but it does happen from time to time. Since, fun fact, this is the first car I've ever owned with a washer system, I was tempted to just forget about it, but I had it replaced at the service center because it can be handy in our salty Ohio winters. Third was a bit more concerning. I drove my car to work about 45 minutes away, as I do every morning. At the end of the day, when I got in it to leave, this error message was displaying on all the screens, and the battery gauge was somehow magically full, despite having not charged the car. After doing some Googling in the parking lot, it looked like the main battery was toast, so I drove it straight to the local service center, which thankfully was only about 20 minutes away, and left it in their parking lot after booking my appointment. The local service team was excellent, and the vehicle is still under its powertrain warranty, so the brand new battery didn't cost me anything. And since Tesla has recently revised their replacement batteries, it's actually a newer, more reliable 400 volt, 90 kilowatt hour battery pack design that weighs less than my original 85 kilowatt hour battery. It's software limited to 85 kilowatt hours, but I was told by the service center that the software limited capacity will open up as the battery degrades, so that I have 85 kilowatt hours of capacity for as long as possible, which I'm okay with. I'm not getting something that I didn't pay for, but the extra capacity isn't just going to waste, which seems like a good way of handling the situation to me. As for why the battery failed, this car had spent its life prior to my ownership being pretty much exclusively charged at superchargers. And just like how using a fast charger on your cell phone battery degrades it quicker, the same applies for cars. I will say, I was made fully aware of that prior to purchasing the car, and I decided to get it anyways due to how much of the warranty was remaining. It's honestly impressive that it still made it to 100,000 miles despite being treated like that. With me only supercharging maybe twice a year or so at most, plus the improved battery pack design, this new battery should last for a long time to come. But what I don't like about this situation is the way that it failed, and beyond that, Tesla's communication policy. For starters, the way it failed. It just randomly failed, with zero warning whatsoever. Sure, you could argue that a gas engine could throw a rod at any time, but that basically never happens. They typically never totally fail. For instance, I drove a 2006 Chevy Cobalt in the interim between Teslas, and during my time with it, the ignition control module started to fail. I could still drive the car fine, but the check engine light was on and it would miss a power stroke every minute or two. It progressively got worse over the course of a week or so, and I eventually drove to my local AutoZone and got a new one. With electric cars, they never give you what I'll call a slow burn failure. Just like with the pyro fuse, they're very much an all or nothing system, which makes their reliability almost worse in a way. Or at least your chances of being truly stranded and needing to hail an Uber home are greater. EVs, of course, do fail less overall, but when they do fail, it will typically be more severe, more abrupt, and more costly. And also, Tesla's communication skills don't help here. When that battery failure error showed up on my screen, I would have loved to call my local service center and ask what that error might mean, and how it might impact driving the car, but you can't. Until you schedule an appointment through the app, you have no way of getting a hold of anyone at the service center, aside from physically driving there and asking them in person, which in my opinion is terrible. If I bought any other luxury car and it threw an error code, I could call a dealer, find out what the error might mean, and what ramifications it may have on driving the car. You can't do that with a Tesla. And the fact that a battery failure can occur at all at this point in the vehicle's life, regardless of usage, is an issue. Had the car not been under warranty, this would have cost $13,000 to get replaced. And that means that this car, or any EV for that matter, will never be attainable by someone in the lower class who perhaps can't or just doesn't want to buy a car for more than, say, $3,000 to $5,000. And that's a fairly large group of people. Of everyone that I'm personally acquainted with, probably at least a quarter of them fall into that category. And this is a large part of the reason I personally don't ever see a 100% electric future. At least not with any battery technology we're currently aware of. And with the Chevy Bolts and F-150 Lightnings going up in flames, and by extension down in flames, the reputation of non-Tesla EVs is getting more and more tarnished by the day. After seeing the mostly positive experience I'd had with my Tesla, I recently had a family member decide to buy a second-hand Chevy Bolt, only to be told by every dealership they called that, despite the fact that all the dealerships have several Bolts on their lots, they couldn't so much as test drive one, much less purchase it, because they were all on hold for battery replacements and there was no ETA on when those replacements might come. Due to the price, a Tesla wasn't an option for them, so they went out and bought a small, efficient, non-hybrid gasoline car, and they love it. And at the end of the day, people's spending power is one of the most powerful forces there is. If nobody's buying EVs, other car makers might just decide that it isn't a profitable endeavor. Early indications are already coming in that the F-150 Lightning isn't selling as well as Ford had hoped, and that was before it was recently recalled over battery quality concerns. Ford's CEO Jim Farley said their QC issues have taken years to appear and will likely take years to fix, which doesn't bode well for Ford's EVs over the next few years. Years that Tesla has already put behind them, testing and tuning their powertrain into the efficient and, for the most part, very reliable state that it's in today. I would argue that the powertrain in Tesla vehicles is the most proven reliable of any EV today. It really is unfortunate that Teslas are so expensive because their reliable powertrain and very rare but usually critical failures do kind of make them ideal beater cars. Any driving I do within a 500 radius from my house will pretty much always be done in the Tesla. Longer than that, and I'm more likely to take the Firebird, especially if it's something time sensitive. For instance, a couple years ago, me and my dad drove from our home in Dayton, Ohio, all the way to Nashville, Tennessee, and back in a single day to purchase a secondhand supercharger off of Facebook. It was a long day, but it was still very doable. In the Tesla, it would not have been possible to do in a single day. And for things like that, a gasoline car is still the only option. And that brings us to the conclusion. I still really like my car. I've had my frustrations with it just like I would any car, but now that the battery is brand new and in the care of someone who knows how to make them last, I have every confidence that this car will easily go another 7 to 10 years without any problems. I was loving life when gas prices went through the roof at the start of 2022, and home charging has proven to be much more convenient than filling up at the pump. And let's face it, this is a gorgeous car. I've actually had several people come up thinking that this was the Model S Plaid because they heard the Plaid was redesigned and my Tesla looks different than any other they've seen. I realize some Tesla fans vehemently hate the nose cone, but I personally actually prefer it. And most of the people I've talked with who don't like the look of newer Teslas actually like the way that mine looks. So it might just appeal to a different group of people. So as I've said in my last video, consider a used Tesla if you're in the market for an electric car. There are a whole different set of things to look out for and consider when getting an electric car, especially a used one, but as long as you do your homework, your chances of getting bit aren't that much greater than buying a gasoline car. But that's only if you're in the market for an EV. If I had everything to do over again, with all the hindsight I have now, I probably would have bought a gas car. If properly maintained and rust-proofed, a reliable gas car can easily match the 200 to 300,000 miles you'll get from a well-maintained EV battery, all the while having cheaper and more accessible parts and repairs that can be done in your driveway. But that's only because I can do all those repairs and maintenance. Not everyone can. And for people like my sister, who doesn't even know how to change her own oil, an EV might be a better option. But that's a choice only you can make. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, hit like, get subscribed, and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And I will see you guys in the next one.